Okay.
Hello?
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 Hi, it's Izzy. Hi, it's Izzy on the phone.
Is he on the phone? How are you?
Baruch Hashem, thank God. And you, Rabbi?
Good. Baruch Hashem. Good. Are you traveling now?
I'm going to shul. I'm on my way.
Oh, okay.
That's
Well,
why that's why you're on the phone.
we will see you shortly then.
Okay, we'll hear you.
Okay.
Oh no, not this shul. I'm going to the shul in Florida.
Oh,
Sorry.
Everything's going to the same destination. It's just
Okay.
all right. So you should have a much warmer
All right,
davening. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, I'm muting.
Okay. So let's see. I believe we finished all of the Imrei Yaakov. We were talking about if you find a kasuva, then you can, in most situations, like we learned yesterday, by a promissory note. In most situations, when you find a promissory note, in most situations, as long as you can ascertain this, the debtor has enough unencumbered property such that would allow you to return the promissory note to the creditor. You should, however, and as the cautionary, I guess, caveat from this whole halacha was that if you find the promissory note lying in the street, don't be so quick to return it to the creditor until you first speak to the debtor. That's really what we're learning from this halacha. You know, just speak to the, like if you find a ksuva, and you should speak to the husband first and just say, you know, I found a ksuva lying out in front of your house. Did you get in a fight with your wife? Right? And it's like, why would there be a ksuva lying out in the street? So, well, yeah, it could be we're getting divorced and we got upset and she threw the ksuva, right? That's when she needs it most, you know, or I threw her ksuva out, or whatever it was, you know, but that's not halachically valid. In other words, if you know that the husband has enough unencumbered property to cover the cost of the ksuva, so then you have to give it back to the wife. There are ksuvas, by the way, these are non-standard ksuvas, but they are done in Eretz Yisrael today, that have dollar amounts written in them. And so they have to be taken more seriously. Sometimes a ksuva could say 500,000 US dollars. And that is literally done in Eretz Yisrael in certain circles today. And so that is where this would be a legitimate issue. If there's a very large amount, you're dealing with, let's say, a kollel couple, or or something like that. So then there really could be an issue of returning the promissory note to the woman without first getting consultation from a beis din. That would be one scenario that I could imagine that this could be really pertinent al pi halacha. Okay. All right, let's take a look at halacha nun. Mishapara miktsas chovo. So, by the way, I just to let you know, I have a sefer that was written by Feivel Cohen of blessed memory. He wrote the sefer Badei HaShulchan, the Sfarim Badei HaShulchan, that deal with Taras HaMishpacha, but he wrote a little small choveret on the laws of inheritance and estates. And I figured that it won't take us long to polish that off, maybe a couple of weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks at the most. And I'm going to try, and the only thing I haven't found out verified yet is if it's available on electronically, so that I can send it to you all. But maybe I can just copy it myself. So we'll probably do that next, and then after that, we can either look at another sefer on Choshen Mishpat. I have a very thick sefer that deals exclusively with copyright law and intellectual property, or that's a very good question. Or there may be other aspects of Choshen Mishpat that you may want to look into. But my understanding is that this chaver would like to stick with financial law. Is that if if I understand you correctly. But if you're okay expanding that horizon, please let me know. We could also look into Hilchos Ribis, although it's quite complicated because of when you can and cannot lend money on interest. So think about it, and please send me a private WhatsApp or a private email if you have any thoughts on the subject. Okay. Misha para mixas chovo, ve'en hamal v'rotza lichtov hapiron al ashtar chov, ela rotza lichtov shovar. So you have a situation where a debt, so let's say $100,000 debt, and the debt has been partially paid. So the debtor has come up with $30,000. Normally what you would do is you would scribble something on the original promissory note to indicate that the debt has been paid for $30,000, and then you would initial it. And I think that, here, take a look. Ve'ein hamal v'rotza, umari davke kishihigia kvar zmana piron shel kol hashtar. He says, let's say the loan has matured. It was a 30-day loan. It's time to pay back the debt. And the debtor has only been able to come up with 30% of the payment. Lakach habrera biad hamal v'lomar she'ein ritzono lichtov hapiraon al gabe hashtar. So there are two options. The creditor can say, we can either write the payment has been made on the shtar itself, right, as an addendum to the shtar, to the contract, to the note, or he could say he doesn't want that. The yacholomar parali shtari v'sulo tzarich midi o echtov lecha shovar. Or, as the language of the Gemara is, he could say, no, this promissory note will remain intact, and either pay me the balance that you owe, or I will write you a receipt for $30,000. I will keep the promissory note as is for 100 grand, and I will write you a receipt, but I will still have this. And the burden, therefore, now is placed upon the debtor to make sure that he saves this receipt, because if he loses it, then the creditor can use this instrument to collect even more than what he was owed. But let's say the note has not fully matured. Let's say the note was, the terms of the loan were you would pay back in installments. The first installment would be 30, the second installment would be 30, and the third installment would be for 40 to pay back the balance. That in that situation, it is the debtor's prerogative to decide how to record the partial payment, because he's done everything, he's fulfilled his obligations according to the terms of the debt. So when the debt is already due and I can't come up with the full amount, then the creditor has the advantage. It's his advantage because the debtor hasn't fulfilled his obligations, his terms of the loan. So therefore, the Malva gets to decide whether we add an addendum to the promissory note and cross out 100,000 and put 70,000 in instead, or whether we keep the promissory note intact and I give you a receipt. But when the debtor is paying according to the terms of the loan and is paying in installments, then in that situation, the creditor would be obligated either to tear up the original promissory note and write a new one, or lichtov hapiron al gabe hashtar im yitzar halova b'kach, or to completely, instead of completely tearing it up, to write an addendum to the shtar, crossing out the amounts or writing on the bottom of it, 30,000 has already been paid. Because the lova can say, I don't want you to write me a receipt, a separate piece of paper that now I have to hold on to, and we keep the original promissory note intact, because now that places the burden on me. I'm worried maybe I'll lose it, maybe something will happen to it. And so therefore he gets to decide in that kind of scenario. So therefore, going back to the halacha, So in a situation where the loan has already matured, then it I apologize for that interruption. I'm going to plug in the cable so that doesn't happen. Yeah, hopefully.
You cut out at the part where you said where it has matured.
Okay. So the advantage of the situation where matured and the debtor hasn't paid back the full amount. Okay. So in that situation, just what the Imrei Yaakov has just told us is that the creditor has really three choices. He can either write a receipt to the debtor for the $30,000 that he's already received and can hold on and keep the original $100,000 promissory note intact. He can write an addendum to the original note marking that 30,000 of the 100,000 has already been paid. Or he can say, I'd like to tear up the entire promissory note and have a new one written up with witnesses saying that you now have a new debt of $70,000. But as we learned previously, in that situation, you would have to date the shtar from today and not from the original date. So it may not be to the creditor's advantage to do that, because since you can only write the date of the debt from today, write the new shtar, you can't predate it, then this potentially could be causing loss to the creditor, that he no longer has a lien from, let's say, 30 days ago. He only has a lien from today. And it could be that since that time, the debtor has divested some of his properties. And if he's divested some of his properties, then anything that had been sold off between 30 days ago and today, the creditor will not be able to latch onto for collection. So it would therefore be to the creditor's advantage, probably, either to write a shovar, to write a receipt and give it to the debtor. That's probably his best option. From a legal standpoint, of like, if he was my client, I would advise him to do that, right? Instead of writing up a whole new promissory note. Yeah, but you can't predate it. In other words, let's say, yeah, but you're not allowed to predate a shtar. That's the whole point, is that once you write up a new shtar, you can't date it from 30 days ago. You can only date it from today. Limited, yeah, yeah.
And right, $100,000 start with, and then first payment, 30,000, put it back beside it, 70,000 still owing, you keep it on the back.
Right. Yeah, that would probably be, although you'd have to make sure. Remember, we learned about this medieval kind of promissory note where both sides were already used. You'd have to see how it was structured, how the paper was written, if there's room on the paper, and all of that stuff. And you'd also have to get witnesses to witness the partial payment. right? Obviously, witnesses are going to be a crucial part of this whole thing. And anytime a loan is made with witnesses and a promissory note, any partial payment of the debt has to be made with witnesses as well in order to protect the interests of the debtor. Well, you're not protecting the creditor if you don't have witnesses, because the creditor has only what to gain if there's no witnesses. Yeah. Okay. All right. So now, okay. So v'chein im bolifroa kol chovo v'amar hamalva avad bimeni hashtar chov. Or let's look at another scenario. Let's say the Malva has lent the Lova, Reuven lent Shimon 100 grand. Shimon wants to pay back the loan. Now, normally what happens is that as soon as Shimon pays back the loan, Reuven gives him the promissory note. And then Shimon would normally tear it up, right? But it's now Reuven can say, here's the cash, give me the paper, give me the note. So let's say Reuven says, "Oy, I lost the note," and Shimon says, "Well, I still need to pay you back the debt." But so what do we do to protect Shimon now if Reuven claims that he lost the note? So im nichtov b'shtar chov ne'emanos mefureshes lamalva kebeis edim yichtov shovar be let's see, what's that abbreviation? Let's see.
Rabbi, can you put
Yes.
on the document, please?
Oh, yes. Sorry. Hold on, just give me a sec. Okay. So so if it is written in the shtar that the malva is to be trusted like two witnesses, and as long as, yichtov shovar b'chasimas yado, so then the malva can just write a receipt with his signature, received payment in full from the lova, from the debtor, signed, Reuven. Okay, and he signs his name. The lo be'edim, and since the original note said that the signatures would be sufficient of both the debtor and the creditor, so then just like the original note did not have witnesses on it, so too the receipt does not need to have witnesses. Shekeben shehemino kibeis edim lomer shelo nifra ubeis kemeya, that since the Lova wrote that I trust you like two witnesses once we both sign on this, and I believe you if you tell me that it was not yet paid, the debtor says to the creditor, as long as you hold this paper. So shuv ein shover be'edim moel lahakchisho. So ela b'chasimas yado. So then it's not just enough to have a receipt with witnesses witnessing a receipt that says the payment was received, but rather the malva has to sign on it as well. Shahadoas baldin kimeya edim, because the admission of a litigant that payment was made is as powerful as two witnesses. So as a matter of fact, so not only do you not need to get two witnesses to sign, but even getting two witnesses to witness the payment is insufficient if the original debt was structured such that it was done without witnesses and just with the signatures of the two parties. But this is only true with a promissory note. Shekasav Bosham Shem Hamalva, where the name of the creditor is recorded. Avalim ein kasav bo shem hamalva klal, But let's say the name of the creditor is not, is that the name of the creditor would have to appear on the promissory note. And in that situation, if the name of the creditor appears on the promissory note, when payment is made in full and the creditor doesn't have the note to relinquish, then he should write a receipt, sign his name, and give it to the debtor. But that's only when the name of the creditor appears on the note. What if the name of the creditor does not appear on the note and it just simply says, I, Shimon Bernstein, owe $100,000 to the bearer of this note, which was apparently the custom that was done in the times when this halacha was written. Rav Shulchan Aruch was writing this. So then, ein shover b'chasimas yad hamalva moel alav im yotzienu acher. Then in that situation, it's like a check, right? That the name is left blank, and therefore, if a person were to write, I, Ruvain Cohen, have received payment in full from Shimon, that's not sufficient. Why is that not sufficient? Because if someone else were to produce that note, what is his claim? The Yomar Kanise may have malva, velo yadati shenifra. Because he could say, well, I purchased the promissory note from Ruvain, and Ruvain never told me that he wrote a receipt that it was paid, right? So in that situation, right? In that situation, if there's the creditor is not named on the note, and because the creditors, what would often happen, creditor would extend money as a loan to a friend. And then instead of waiting for the payment to come back, he might sell the promissory note to somebody else or give it as what payment of his debt to somebody else, to Levi, to a third party. So in that situation, Levi would come forward with the promissory note, and it basically says, I owe $100,000 to the bearer of this note, signed Shimon, like a blank check, right, where the name has not been filled in. Okay, so Masha'en Kain Shovar Be'edim Lo Yuchal Liton Lo Yadati Ki Ha'edim Motziim Hakol. And that's the benefit of getting a receipt written with witnesses. Because once a receipt is written with witnesses, as we've said multiple times already, anytime a document is enacted with witnesses, that already news travels. So therefore, in other words, before a person would take possession of a promissory note as payment or would purchase a promissory note, if he knows, he would do his due diligence and try to discover if payment was already made on this note. And he would ask around town saying, does anyone know of a transaction that was done where a debt for $100,000 from this guy named Shimon was paid off? And since there were witnesses on the payback, because witnesses signed on the shovar, on the receipt, he would eventually discover that he should not accept this promissory note as cash because it has already been paid back. Okay, so it can get very messy, and I guess that's the cautionary tale is, don't take an IOU as cash until you verify that the IOU has not yet been paid back. You can't just take the malva and the bearer of the note. You have to verify that indeed not only is he owed the money, but not only did he make the loan and extend credit to somebody, but he also was never paid back. And you'd have to, the only way to verify that, if the name of the malva is not on the note, would be to do some kind of inquiry around town. Is anyone aware of a payment that was made with Adam? Right, and it's only after, I guess, you did your due diligence and you asked around to a sufficient number of people, nobody was familiar with it, went to the shul, you clapped on the bima, you asked everyone, if anyone's aware, right? Back in the day, in the shtetl, there was one shul or two shuls at most, And so you'd go both to the place and say, is anyone aware of this having happened? I guess in today's world, they used to also put an ad in the paper sometimes for legal announcements, but we don't even have that anymore. So how do they make legal announcements today? They don't use newspapers anymore, do they?
Hardly ever. You can do it by mail. The court can order it in different ways. Have it delivered, personally.
No, but what if the court requires a public declaration?
It's so small, there's hundreds of a page.
Uh,
Yeah, you do see in the newspapers, legal notices still, but that is.
No one reads it. No.
Yeah,
I think it's on the receivership,
certain email list or something as well, or.
Yeah, so let's say I want to do business with a company, like Doug has just said, I want to do business with a company and I want to find out whether they're in receivership or not.
So there are lists, there's there's for bankruptcy, there's
see everyone in the bank.
governmental.
Where do you go to see that? Bankruptciesareus.com. That's right. Okay. All right. So just
Said if the creditor has lost, but he writes a receipt with the loan comes to pay the money there.
yeah, he gives them a receipt, says
And that means, say he counted them as two witnesses,
yes.
even though he's lost the star. Because I thought
That's
he
right.
counted as two witnesses, held their star in his hand. I thought that's what he said earlier.
Well, so he said it depends. It depends how the original loan was made. If the original loan was made with witnesses, then the shover, the receipt, has to be written with witnesses. If the original loan was made with trusting each party with their own signatures, then the receipt can be written the same way. Either way, even if the original star he says he claims was lost, he can write a receipt and just sign it, and that's fine. Now, here's the thing. So first of all, in a situation like that, it does place the debtor at a disadvantage because the debtor now has to hold on to that for an interminable amount of time. He's got to keep this within his documents because who knows when that supposed star is going to turn up. And then the other thing is that if it only had the signature of the creditor and a third party were to come up and present it, then if it didn't have witnesses on it, then the shovar, the receipt didn't have witnesses on it, that's going to create problems for a third party. And that's why he says, because how's he supposed to know if it didn't have witnesses on it? How is he supposed to make his inquiry? Yeah.
How would you know?
Right. We're going to have to hold it here. I'm sorry. So we'll continue this Imrei tomorrow.